Welcome back to strategic management and corporate governance. And we were talking about agency problems last time. When there are problems, to meet the problems or to avoid the problems, there is a cost element also. And now I would begin the discussion with the costs. It is always rational to avoid the costs, and if we want to avoid the costs, we should be avoiding the problems as such. But if somehow there is a high probability of problems, then we have to keep preemptive checks also, which also incurs costs. So the point is, either we develop a culture which is so conducive that we develop an environment of enhancing the integrity level of all. You see, humans, they don't want to do things wrongly at large. It's my personal belief that mankind is there to develop themselves without doing bad to others. Largely, this is my belief actually, and that is how we should be believing actually, and that is where the fundamental of ethics lies in. But if we preempt that everyone is there to do something wrong, then we would be putting so many checks, and that would be enhancing the cost. On the other side, as I said last time, that until and unless a conflict occurs, we never know that what kind of a conflicting situation might come in, and then we create a policy and a law around that basically. That also incurs a lot of costs. So agency costs and governance mechanism. Let us see what happens. So the fact that principals do not know which managers might act opportunistically demonstrates why principals establish governance mechanisms. However, the firm incurs costs when it uses one or more governance mechanisms. You see, a mechanism has to be strengthened, then definitely there has to be a cost. Why mechanisms have to be brought in? To avoid the conflicts, to avoid the problems. If everything is in coherence, then probably we might not have required mechanism per se. If everyone knew their duties, their responsibilities, and they would keep up to those, then there is no need for anything largely, and that happened probably sometime. There are instances wherein historically we have known that organizations, they existed with lots of integrity. Agency costs are the sum of incentive costs, monitoring costs, enforcement costs, and individual financial losses incurred by principals, because governance mechanisms cannot guarantee total compliance by the agent. And here the agent perspective is demonstrated, but I am trying to time and again point out that if principals, they do not keep up their integrity, then what? We presume that because they have initiated everything, they would keep up the integrity levels, and they would actually always want the benefit of the stakeholders, whatever it may come, because their sweat and blood has gone into as far as keeping up the pace of the business as such. But many a times when I decide to corner everything towards myself, have you heard that story of a king who wished for that whatever he touches becomes gold? We have all heard that story, and that is precisely the point which I am trying to make. So if a firm is diversified, governance costs increase because it is more difficult to monitor what is going on inside the firm. In general, managerial interests may prevail when governance mechanisms are weak. This is an important line, this is an important statement which authors have tried to demonstrate. So in general, managerial interests may prevail when governance mechanisms are weak, as is exemplified by allowing managers a significant amount of autonomy to make strategic decisions. If, however, the board of directors controls managerial autonomy, or if other strong governance mechanisms are used, the firm's strategies should better reflect the interest of the shareholders. There have been several incidents wherein managers overseas, managers, the country heads, several people, they did not do what they were supposed to. We have heard about Bearings Bank, we have heard about other kinds of incidents, we have heard about hiring situations which have occurred, we have heard about Kingfisher Airlines kind of a situation also. We have heard about you would find it in case of several kinds of organizations basically. There is an interesting documentary on Netflix. If you will go there, and you will find there are several incidents which are explained at country levels largely. And many renowned organizations have been named as far as by those authors that can be verified through different kinds of legal documents or reports which have been published by authentic organizations or government organizations and so on. There have been several countries at large which have been involved in different kinds of, wherein countries they are running large corporations, and large corporations are involved in different kinds of things, and so on. Union Carbide, a very devastating incident which happened in India, and I have talked about that earlier also, somehow reflects this corporate governance element strongly. Now, let us talk about different forms of governance mechanisms, largely into two divisions: internal governance mechanisms and external governance mechanisms. What is new about it? But the point is, nothing might be new about it, but these are the points which we have to ponder upon. For example, within industrial governance mechanism, there is an element of ownership concentration. The other element is the board of directors. The other aspect is executive compensations, and on the other side, external governance mechanism, market for corporate control is there. So, you see, let's see how these aspects are to be understood and dealt with. Now, let us talk about ownership concentration for that matter. Both the number of large block shareholders and the total percentage of shares they own define ownership concentration. Large block shareholders typically own a specific percent of corporations issued shares that may differ country to country and according to the law of the land. Ownership concentration as a governance mechanism has received considerable interest because large block shareholders are increasingly active in their demands that corporations adopt effective governance mechanisms to control managerial decisions. It is good for organizations to have large block shareholders because you have larger money from larger corporations or larger probably individual shareholders. But the point is that might also not be good beyond a certain kind of a point. That is why every country or largely whole of the world, there is a specific percentage. Authors have given that in the text it is given as 5%, but probably that is not true for all the countries. That is why we have just written a generic term here, with all due respect to what authors have written in the textbook, and that is not, we are imposing our own thing as far as these particular lines go. In book it is written 5%. But that probably is true, as I said, for few countries. So, a specific percentage which is a limit, the highest limit, and that is again a checkpoint. So, large block shareholders, they would try to take things as far as with that kind of a spirit that nothing should go wrong because they have a large stake there. But if they would have had larger stake, then things would have been different basically. Then it might have been a problem. That means their interest would be higher, and that means they would have tried to raise the influence within the structure as such also. Or they it would have been a problem if they are not finding it towards their own interest, then they might pull that situation. That also is a problem. So, that is where people would have decided, would have found out because of several kinds of conflicts which would have occurred, and they definitely occurred, wherein this percentage thing as per different countries or different kinds of environments would have been fixed. In general, diffuse ownership. Now, large block shareholders, and here comes diffuse ownership. So, in general, diffuse ownership, a large number of shareholders with small holdings and few if any large block shareholders produces weak monitoring of managers' decisions. You see, going too high is also not good, going too low, thin is also not good. We have to look at the optimality, but optimality is associated with where it would evolve by itself. You see, optimality would suggest that this is where things would go right, or this is where things would not kind of deflect in terms of as far as the keeping up that integrity level goes, or opportunism would not inflate as far as the situation goes. So, among other problems, diffuse ownership makes it difficult for owners to effectively coordinate their actions. Thus, with high degrees of ownership concentration, the probability is greater that managers' strategic decisions will intend to maximize shareholder value. The growing influence of institutional owners. We talked about that there are several kinds of investors. So, there are institutional owners. Ownership of many modern corporations is now concentrated in the hands of institutional investors rather than individual shareholders. For example, in India there are many banks, there are many insurance companies which are large institutional holders or institutional stockholders, stakeholders within different kinds of businesses and organizations and so on. Institutional owners are financial institutions such as stock mutual funds and pension funds that control large block shareholder positions. So, that is again mutual funds are also behaving that way, and then individual organizations also behave that way as far as institutionalized ownership goes. So, because of their prominent ownership positions, institutional owners as large block shareholders are a powerful governance mechanism. Now, there is a situation, large block shareholders, those can be individuals as well as institutional owners. Then there is diffused ownership wherein it goes too thin. Then you bring them together through mutual funds or different kinds of funds, pension funds, and wherein someone is actually taking care of those funds, although those funds has contribution of millions of people largely. So, for example, this pension fund in India, for example, they invest in different kinds of portfolios and so on, and those are largely secured portfolios. And if they go for probably someday they might go for riskier portfolios. So, then they would assure that somehow the portfolios they would choose for, they should be having that kind of a focus and integrity wherein the investors' money should be intact, because they are answerable to investors' money which is too thin. Individual investors might stand up in front of them and ask somewhere that where is my money largely, and this is the growth I expected. So, that kind of thing basically helps as far as a governance mechanism, because of that you will keep on creating policies and structures wherein you would be doing things right. As investors, institutional owners have both the size and the incentive to discipline ineffective top level managers, and you see that is what the major point is, to discipline ineffective top level managers, and can significantly influence a firm's choice of strategies and overall strategic decisions. Although it does not happen all the time, many banks they collapsed, many organizations they have collapsed. In terms of government supported banking organizations, mergers happen and government tries to bail out the situation as far as banking organizations go. But in case of many private organizations, things collapse and investors' money drown despite of the presence of institutional investors. And as I said that, you see, although corporate governance is much beyond as far as just keeping the interest of the stockholders or financial controls and this and that, but the point is that largely this is evident, more evident in these kind of situations or in terms of financial gains and financial defaulters. Otherwise, as I said, corporate governance is also about as far as how to lead and direct the organization in terms of the right conduct of people, the right human resource structures which you create, the right kind of products you choose, the right kind of process you choose, the right kind of environmental policies which you create within the organizations, because ultimately everything in coherence would lead you towards the kind of vision. Although there is one more important thing which we have to remember, that whatever you do in terms of corporate governance gets reflected in your financial statements at the end of the day somehow. Research evidence indicates that institutional and other large block shareholders are becoming more active in their efforts to influence a corporation's strategic decisions unless they have a business relationship with the firm. And we are continuously referring to HIT, Ireland, Oskison, 2012, Strategic Management, Concepts and Cases, Competitiveness and Globalization by Cengage Learning. Then comes in internal governance mechanism in terms of the board of directors. Typically, shareholders monitor the managerial decisions and actions of a firm through the board of directors. Shareholders elect members to their firm's board. Those who are elected are expected to oversee managers and to ensure that corporation is operated in ways that will maximize its shareholders' wealth in a right manner, righteously. Righteousness is the most important element, and that is how board of directors are elected and brought into the situation. Many a times, and mandatorily independent directors also, who do not have direct conflict of interest with the organization. That means they are not there for nurturing their own interests. They are from specific fields, they are experts and so on. Boards have the power to direct the affairs of organization, punish and reward managers, and you see, as the name says, board of directors, they are there to direct actually. So, punish and reward managers and protect shareholders' rights and interest. Thus, an appropriately structured and effective board of directors protects owners from managerial opportunism. And here comes that particular kind of, a specific element of opportunism, wherein authors are still talking about agent opportunism, but then they are trying to indicate that the board of directors protects owners from managerial opportunism, wherein they are talking about owners in terms of stockholders largely, and people who have invested with a confidence that things would go right largely. It is not specifically about the owners who own the situation basically. Corporations are now a group of people who have invested there within the organization, and then there are people who are nurturing the organization and taking the organization ahead in terms of managerial decision making. That is how we are looking at larger corporations at this moment. Although there are families associated with those larger corporations who have larger stakes, who have initiated those corporations and somehow, and now they have restructured those organizations with the perspective of managerial decision making on one side and then stockholders on the other side, but they are also still there and they are the principal owners. Board members are seen as stewards to their company's resources, and the way they carry out these responsibilities affects the society in which their firm operates. Here comes the most important line of whole of this discussion which we have been making this session and the last session. And I will just repeat that for you once. Board members are seen as stewards of their company's resources, and resources include almost everything we have talked about, that human resource also, financial resource also, operational resource also, and so on. Complete value chain if you will look at in terms of resources. And the way they carry out these responsibilities affects the society in which their firm operates. And now if we talk about organizations like Titan and Tata Steels and several other organizations wherein they have created a sort of opulence for the societies they have been operating in, the surroundings, the environment and their immediate environment, the places they are located at, the prosperity and opulence they have tried to bring in there as far as the whole thing goes. That is what these lines mean to say. And if you keep on expanding that kind of a thing, then that means you are willing to have prosperity and opulence for almost every human being around you, especially your country. Classifications of board of director members: insiders, the firm's CEO and other top level managers; related outsiders, individuals not involved with the firm's day-to-day operations but who have a relationship with the company; outsiders, individuals who are independent of the firm in terms of day-to-day operations and other relationships. Now generally, let's try to further this argument. So generally, board members, often called directors, are classified into one of the three groups. Insiders are active top level managers in the corporation who are elected to the board because they are a source of information about the firm's day-to-day operations. Without them, we won't be able to understand what kind of implementation, execution, and that is why they are called chief executive officer. So what kind of execution, what kind of strategic choices are being made, what kind of targets are being put up in front of the organizations, how organization is being led. Related outsiders have some relationship with the firm, contractual or otherwise, that may create questions about their independence, but these individuals are not involved with the corporation's day-to-day activities. They are associated, but they are not at the helm of the affairs. And outsiders provide independent counsel to the firm and may hold top level managerial positions in other companies or may have been elected to the board prior to the beginning of the current CEO's tenure, wherein they are there just to keep up the levels that this is what should be done. So, when we talk of related outsiders, they might include some of those principal owners as well, and that is how these kind of situations are there. Many a times, although now in India things have augmented a lot as far as this structure goes basically, but there was a specific time when someone from the principal owners was the executive also, was involved with this kind of a situation also, and there were choices this person was making and so on. But now further transparency has been enforced and policies have been augmented, and there is a clear demarcation of the responsibilities and the conflict of interest and so on, because several kinds of cases have come up and there are several talked about cases, and we have continuously be enumerating such cases, and one of the famous cases definitely was Satyam and so on. But the point is that it is not just to mark out these cases time and again and accuse people. It is not the intent of this kind of a discussion, and I personally denounce that. But the thing is that those kind of incidents have explained to us when and how conflict of interest comes in, and as I have been telling you continuously, the speed, the span, these 2-3 reasons are there wherein we become vulnerable. The level, the power that makes us vulnerable. There is a famous saying, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, or tends to corrupt absolutely. I may be wrong, may not be giving the exact saying, but this is how the saying is, and definitely it actually makes us vulnerable. Now, we are talking about enhancing the effectiveness of board of directors. So, because of importance of board of directors in corporate governance, and as a result of increased scrutiny from shareholders, in particular large institution investors, the performances of individual board members and of entire boards are being evaluated more formally and with greater intensity, given the demand for greater accountability and improved performance. Many boards have initiated voluntary changes. Among these changes are, that is what I was trying to hint at, increases in the diversity of the backgrounds of board members. Example, a greater number of directors from public service, academic and scientific settings, a greater percentage of ethnic minorities and women and members from different countries on boards are being taken now basically. You see, people from public service. Then further, the strengthening of internal management and accounting control systems are being introduced. Internal management and accounting control systems, wherein those kind of accounts should be monitored which make us vulnerable, and then the establishment and consistent use of formal processes to evaluate the board's performance. Even the board's performance, we have to have mechanisms and measures wherein board's performance, their directional orientation, their intensity has to be managed. How many times they are meeting, what kind of discussions they are conducting, what kind of minutes are being formed, what kind of monitoring they are doing in terms of the decisions they have taken. Are they, are those decisions being carried forward by the executive team and so on. Additional changes include the creation of a lead director role that has strong powers with regard to the board agenda and oversight of non-management board member activities. Modification of the compensation of directors, especially reducing or eliminating stock options as a part of the package. Corporate governance, wherein the role of board of directors in the strategy crafting and strategy executing process is also discussed by the authors. And just to give you a brief glimpse, senior managers have led the responsibility for crafting and executing a company's strategy. However, it is the duty of a company's board of directors to exercise strong oversight and see that management performs the various tasks involved in the strategy making, strategy executing process in a manner that best serves the interest of shareholders and other stakeholders. There are 4-5 points. Oversee the company's financial accounting and financial reporting practices. Conduct. Critically apprise the company's direction, strategy and business approaches. Evaluate the caliber of senior executives' strategic leadership skills. Strategic leadership skills. Institute a compensation plan for top executives that rewards them for actions and results that serve shareholders' interests. And you see, we can elaborate upon these kind of things wherein 1 or 2 important points are there. When we talk of overseeing the company's financial accounting and financial reporting practices, while top executives, particularly the company's CEO and CFO, are primarily responsible for seeing that the company's financial statements fairly and accurately report the results of company's operations, board members have a legal obligation to warrant the accuracy of the company's financial reports and protect shareholders, and that is where transparency comes in. Transparency is, is a wider term, and making things bare might be very close to transparency, but sometimes you cannot say everything. But then when we talk of financials, we can maintain complete transparency. There are two types of elements associated with transparency in terms of the way we are going ahead in terms of our financial conduct, and also declaring in terms of how we are looking at our conduct in terms of our responsibility for the environment. Environment includes everything, including the physical environment, the people and so on, and what kind of potential we carry, wherein we could have done so many things, but somehow we were unable to do those kind of things. So that may not be reported as actual losses, but they can be talked about as losses as well. That is also an element of transparency when we talk of such kind of situations. So you see, there is a huge scope for keeping up the levels of how we do things rightly. It is their job to ensure that generally accepted accounting principles are used properly in preparing the company's financial statements, and that proper financial controls are in place to prevent fraud and misuse of funds. When we are talking of critically appraising the company's direction, strategy and business approaches, board members are also expected to guide management in choosing a strategic direction and to make independent judgments about the validity and wisdom of management's proposed strategic actions. Validity and wisdom of management's proposed strategic actions. This aspect of their duties takes on heightened importance when the company's strategy is failing or is plagued with faulty execution, and certainly when there is a precipitous collapse in profitability, and I was talking about recession 2007 and 8, and there are several such incidents in as far as being called as pocketed incidents. Evaluate the caliber of senior executives' strategic leadership skills. You see, the board is always responsible for determining whether the current CEO is doing a good job of strategic leadership as a basis of awarding salary increases and bonuses and deciding on retention or removal. What is their conduct, how they are leading the organization. Are they only focused on profits and profitability, or are they focused upon leading this organization in a composite kind of a manner with the vision, towards the vision and with the visionary zeal as far as the organization is concerned. Boards must also exercise due diligence in evaluating the strategic leadership skills of other senior executives in line to succeed the CEO. When the incumbent CEO steps down or leaves for a position elsewhere, the board must elect a successor, either going with an insider or deciding that an outsider is needed to perhaps radically change the company's strategic course. Institute a compensation plan for top executives that rewards them for actions and results that serve shareholder interests. A basic principle of corporate governance is that owners of a corporation, the shareholders, delegate operating authority and managerial control to top management in return for compensation. In their role as agents of shareholders, top executives have a clear and unequivocal duty to make decisions and operate the company in accord with shareholders' interests. This does not mean disregarding the interest of other stakeholders, employees, suppliers, the communities in which the company operates and society at large. And then the element of that most boards of directors have a compensation committee also, composed entirely of directors from outside the company, to develop a salary and incentive compensation plan that rewards senior executives for boosting the company's long-term performance on behalf of shareholders. The compensation committee's recommendations are presented to the full board for approval. There are so many responsibilities which boards of directors have, and we can keep on enumerating those. There are several kinds of resources which have to be fetched for understanding these things in depth, and we will keep on talking on these kind of things in my next session, with other elements being added to this discussion to compositively understand what corporate governance actually means and what actually it does. I will be catching up back with you. Till then, goodbye.